Now, just so while I'm hot, I just went right back on this. Janice Sanders, right there. You know, I come from the 2x4 mill. I'm living in Morton, Washington. Dan Dunn is my roommate, and that would be my brother Jerry's step brother in law because his wife, Sammy Luann Frost, there's an L in the middle of the name. Jerry marries women that has an L in the middle of their name. I wonder if Rose has an L in the middle of her name too. I wouldn't doubt it if Rose Vetter doesn't have an L in her name. And by the way, Jim Vetter pulled me off to the side, pulled me into the office at the Campbell Chevrolet, or no, the Campbell Chrysler dealership in Centralia, Washington, and told me about my brother moving in on his mother's property and stuff. And I'll tell you what, I just sat back and smiled to hear about how Rose Vetter's brother is talking about my brother Jerry. So I'll just tell you what, right there, you want to told about Jerry Wright, you just talked to oh Vetter right down there at that dealership. And I'll tell you what, he's a nice guy too. He knows me. He only knows me through my brother Jerry, but he knows that I'm nice. Well, my brother Jerry's different than what I am, and that's for goddamn sure. I came in there to look at a brand new fucking car to buy, and you know what? After Jim Vetter told me that, I actually didn't feel comfortable about sitting there and buying a car from there, even though that I like Jim Vetter. There is no problem. I like Jim Vetter. I have the most up respect for his mother that bowled in the Chehalis Bowling Center. You know, my brother Jerry hooks up with this woman. You know, I mean, one of my bowlers. You know, I mean, he targets things. And by the way, Rose Vetter's mother's house today has a sheriff's green look to it. And also, my brother Jerry lives right next door. His house has been painted gray now, and he's put logs up across his property and barbed wire fence and stuff, and he's coopered himself in because he knows that I'm on his case after all of this. And the coffee cup right here that has his face on it, you see, he thought he came to the court. You know, they all been working this together, Don Burgess and Jerry and everything. You know, I even seen Don Burgess, and Don Burgess said Jerry Wright forgot what I had done for him. And he says, you know, what brought this on was he says I was right there. Jerry Wright comes in, and he says he wouldn't even acknowledge me as a person. He just looked at me like I was garbage. He says, your brother forgot what I did for him. What did my brother do for him? Oh, they were in the Boy Scouts, Don Burgess, D.B. Cooper, all this stuff. My dad doing that. And by the way, Don Burgess and Little Joe put the hit on me when I come up from the 2x4 of that mill and seen Dan Dunn there and Janice Sanders and stuff. They took me over to his house, bought a case of beer, had me go over there to their place. They ended up putting a hit on me right there. There was gunshot. I got nicked in the head. Joe ended up getting bloodied up some. Janice was saying, will you protect me? Will you protect me? I didn't know what the hell I was protecting him about. I didn't know it was about the bowling alley. I didn't know it was about cocaine. And by the way, Janice Sanders's prior uh, man in Morton, Washington. And right off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of his name. Janice Sanders and oh boy, what was his name? I wrote a lot of names down here. Well, I'll remember him before too long. But her boyfriend, he got murdered. He ended up dead, cocaine, and he was being rolled around in a van. And by the way, I know that was Brenda and Dawn, and Dawn and Brenda drove him around, and he died of cocaine. I heard he stayed on. He lived for 3 days being traveled around in the van, and you know the stories and stuff got back, and I knew who I goddamn knew who it was. I knew who it was. It was Denise Sanders's first love of her life. And I knew both of those people, and a lot of people in Morton, Washington would remember Schulte. Uh, yeah, Danny Schultz. Danny Schultz is what it was. Mike Schulte's from Port Angeles, Washington. Mike Schulte was a friend of Danny Johnson's, and he was in Port Angeles during the bombing at the Aggies uh, restaurant down there in Port Angeles, Washington. And that's a story in its own. It has everything to do with that Mossy Rock bowling alley and getting some money to purchase it from that bombing down there in Port Angeles, Washington. But then again, you know, Danny Schultz was Janice Sanders's husband or boyfriend to be, and they ended up getting murdered. Then she ended up with this little Joe, and this little Joe, I met little Joe over there at Don Burgess's house, and I met him with Wes Stencil because they come driving up in a 1969 Camaro with the flip down headlights and stuff, and I'm a car buff, by the way, so I know my cars as a root beer brown one. And they pulled that car up there, and I looked at it, and God, this Wes Stencil is just a giant of a guy. And now little Joe, he's short, he's big, and he's round, but he's big. He weighs like maybe 400 pounds. He's closer to 400 pounds than 300 pounds, I'll tell you that one right now. And, he didn't get little Joe because, he's little, but his name's Joe, and I'll tell you what, they call him Little Joe Tromley. And when they come up the walkway and they came in, Jesus, I go big and bigger. These guys look like two big wrestlers and stuff. It wasn't supposed to be insultive. But when I come back up from the 2x4 up there after work, just so happens that this little Joe and Janice is sitting there, and Dan's there too. And by the way, there's been some cocaine traveling back and forth because I got Dan some cocaine for $700 an ounce. Okay, and I already got stories and stuff that talk about this. And I got Dan some cocaine for $700 an ounce, and I actually charged him a lot more than that because the person told me, they said, you better sell it for $1,400. He says, you sell it for $1,400, you won't have a problem. Well, he already told me what he was paying for it. And he told me if I could get it for $2,000, he'd be goddamn happy. And he got it for $2,000 is what he got it for. And I made the difference between $750 and $2,000. And you know what? I goddamn needed the fucking money. I'm not gonna sit here and goddamn lie and make up fucking stories. By the way, that's a long goddamn time ago. And I would imagine that I have a statute of limitations. This is something that just happened. Somebody says, Jesus Christ, can you get me some cocaine? I'm working at the mill. I'm working at the opposite mill as him. And I just, what are we talking, he tells me something, and I said, well, I'll see what I can do. Well, hell, when I figured it out as $750, I went ahead and picked him up some cocaine. And I just got the money from him and gave him the cocaine, And the next time I did it, because he fucking came through, I went and bought 2 ounces of cocaine and paid myself back, And I did it a couple times, and then they did that hit from me, and then they put the cops on me, They put the hit on me at the bar. They took me to little Joe and Janice's house. Janice is over there saying, will you protect me? Will you protect me? What's going on? These guys are setting me up. Dan Dunn and Don Burgess and little Joe. Janice ends up getting murdered, a while back, a few months later. But she ends up getting fucking murdered. She's over there in the cemetery. Great big stone, like I was telling Ernie out here, that just screams out they murdered her. I told them all about they murdered the woman. was just telling them about the bar story and stuff, and I told them, you know, when you come over and I get to talk to you, and yeah, I just really appreciate it. When I get to sit down and talk to people, and we start talking about memory lanes and stuff, and how things were happening, and how this here has everything to do with John F. Kennedy and the murder up there in Port Angeles, Washington. You know, we got the Johnson's bookstore up there, and I said, this has to do with John F. Kennedy and stuff like this. And, you know, he's persons, you know, he don't want it. He knows it's getting hot on this one. And you know, he says, well, I got to get going and stuff. And I walk him out, you know, I walk him out this way. And we start talking about a little bit of politics and stuff. And pretty much I'm telling them that you know, Donald Trump's a criminal. And I'm saying, drill, baby, drill. I said, we don't need to drill no more wells in the United States of America. We're pumping more oil right now than ever before. We've got more oil. We've got key oil. I don't think we need any oil. Matter of fact, I told them, I said, if we have a fight over there in the Middle East, I said, it's not going to be $5 a gallon like when the Twin Towers got knocked down and we had a Republican president over there. The gas went up to $5 a gallon. I goddamn know their pitch, but I'll tell you what, I see right through the goddamn Republican Party's crap. I mean, if these people want to go and live by signs and stuff like that, I don't know what to say, but maybe you should check in, because check us out, because we're not living by signs, and the majority of us in the United States, which is about 80% of the popular, can see that 20% of them's crazy. They're living by signs, and they shouldn't be doing it. You know what? If you knew better, you'd do better. My name's John Wright. I'm just telling you the truth about murders in the Pacific Northwest around Morton, Washington. This has everything to do with Hezbollah in the Middle East. This has everything to do with my attorney, James L. Rowland, Dirty Boy Scouts, George Fairhart, Bruce Kimsey of Lewis County, Washington. My brother, Jerry L. Wright. My dad was Zodiac Killer. George L. Wright. 13 letters from the Zodiac Killer is George L. Wright. Hey, I didn't know. But look at this. They put me on the run. I've paid the goddamn price for too long. And they ripped me off for a gold mine down in Nevada, 50 miles north of Elko, Nevada. Freeport Gold's right there. Bull Run's across the way, like about 8 miles across, like 8 Mile, the song, you know, E&M. Everybody from the 8 Mile, blah, blah, blah. I'll tell you what, and they also built Twin Towers right there at Freeport Gold. And Malin P. Kent, my father, my stepdad, hey, he worked for the Clampers. He's the president of the Clampers. He works for Freeport Gold. They ripped off the goddamn gold mine. And by the way, I was taken to Freeport Gold by my brother Jerry, and they said they would have that Freeport, they would have that gold mine. They stole it. And they ran me out of that town by guns. Anyway, thank you for your time, and you have a nice day.